The alert chimed, a polite, synthesized sound that cut through the recycled air of the Odyssey station like a scalpel. It was the sound we'd been waiting 400 million miles and 17 months to hear. On the main screen of the command module, the data packet from the surface blossomed into existence, a cascade of numbers and spectrographic charts that, to a layman, would look like a migraine. To me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "We're through," I said, my voice feeling too loud in the sudden hush. Across the console, Maya Singh leaned forward, her dark eyes wide, tracing the peaks on the graph with a trembling finger. "Avery, look at that. Is that—" "Amino acids," Ben Carter finished, his voice a low murmur beside me. He pushed his glasses up his nose, his usual scientific detachment warring with the raw awe on his face. "And complex polymers. Not just trace amounts. This is a soup." For a moment, nobody spoke. We just stared. Down on the frozen surface of Europa, 12 miles beneath our orbit, the Icebreaker 7 drill had punched through the last layer of the ice shell. It had lowered a probe into an ocean that hadn't seen the light of day in billions of years, and found life. Not fossilized microbes on Mars, not theoretical biosignatures in a distant atmosphere, but concrete, complex building blocks swimming in liquid water, right here in our own backyard. "Holy hell!" a voice crackled in our earpieces. Jackson Riley, our pilot, was patched in from the simulator bay. We called him Jax. "Does this mean we're a go for the dive?" I keyed the comms. "That's what it means, Jax. Get your gear. Briefing in 10. The mood in the briefing room was electric, a strange cocktail of triumph and terror. The four of us were the primary crew for the descent. I was the mission commander and geologist, Dr. Avery Walsh. My job was to keep everyone alive and make sense of the world we were about to enter. Maya was our bioacoustics and signal specialist. If anything down there made a sound, she would hear it. Ben, our cautious xenobiologist and medic, was there to make sure whatever we found didn't kill us and that we didn't kill it. And Jax was the best submersible pilot the Navy ever produced, the only man trusted to fly the Triton. "All right, listen up," I began, pulling the mission parameters onto the holo display. A schematic of the Triton, our deep ocean submersible, floated in the air between us. "The data is confirmed. The primary objective has shifted from exploration to first contact protocol. Ben, your containment protocols are now the priority. Nothing comes back with us without going through a full decontamination cycle." Ben nodded, his jaw tight. "I'll need to run a full diagnostic on the sample intake system. The last thing we need is a contaminant bypassing the filters." "Maya," I continued, turning to her, "I want every sensor you have at maximum sensitivity. Record everything. Every vibration, every temperature shift, every magnetic anomaly." Her face was luminous with excitement. "I've been dreaming of this since I was a kid, Avery. We're going to be the first people to listen to another world." "Just make sure it's not the last thing you hear," Jax quipped, leaning back in his chair with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. "Don't you worry, folks. I'll get the Triton down there and back up again. I've landed on pitching carrier decks in a hurricane. A 12-mile elevator ride in the dark? Piece of cake." I let a small smile show. We needed his confidence. We needed Ben's caution and Maya's optimism. We needed all of it. "This isn't just another mission," I said, my voice dropping. The excitement in the room sobered. "This is a first. What we do down there will be in history books. Let's make sure we write a good chapter. We descend to the surface base at 0600 tomorrow." Later that night, alone in my quarters, I pulled up a picture on my datapad. It was my daughter, Lily, age 7, grinning a gap-toothed smile on a beach in California. The photo was 10 years old, a lifetime ago. She was in college now, studying astrophysics, inspired by the very work that had taken me so far from her. I looked from her bright smile to the window, where the colossal, swirling form of Jupiter hung in the blackness, its great red spots staring back like a baleful eye. We had found life, but in that moment, staring into the infinite void with that gas giant looming over us, all I felt was a profound and unsettling sense of dread. We were about to knock on a door that had been closed for eons, and we had no idea what was waiting on the other side. The transition from the weightless grace of the Odyssey to the crushing gravity of Europa was always a shock. Our lander touched down on the ice plain beside the Connemara surface base, a squat collection of interconnected modules hunkered down against the relentless radiation. Outside, the landscape was alien and majestic. Jagged ridges of ice, stained a dirty red by mineral salts, stretched to the horizon under a pure black sky. And floating in that sky, impossibly large, was Jupiter. It didn't look like a planet, it looked like a god. Its cloudy bands of orange, white, and brown, a silent judging presence that dominated everything. Inside the base, the atmosphere was sterile and functional. The main airlock led directly to the gantry overlooking the borehole. And there, suspended in its launch cradle, was the Triton. It wasn't a sleek vessel from science fiction. It was a 10-foot diameter sphere of polished titanium, bristling with external sensors, lights, and a pair of heavy-duty manipulation arms. It looked less like a ship and more like a knight's helmet, designed for one thing: to withstand pressure. Jax was already there, running a final systems check with the surface crew. He gave us a thumbs up as we approached. "She's ready to swim, boss. All systems green." We suited up and climbed inside. The interior was cramped, a cocoon of screens and control panels. There was barely enough room for the four of us to sit without our elbows touching. I took the commander's seat, with Jax at the pilot's controls in front of me. Maya and Ben settled into the observer stations on either side. The heavy hatch swung shut, and a series of deep, resonant clunks echoed through the hall as the locking bolts engaged. For the next 24 hours, this sphere would be our entire universe. "Connemara base to Triton," the voice of the surface controller crackled in our headsets. "You are clear for launch. Godspeed." "Roger that, Connemara," Jax replied, his fingers dancing over the controls. "Beginning descent." There was a slight jolt as the clamps released us. We began to sink. The gantry disappeared above us, and we were plunged into the borehole. The external lights of the Triton flickered on, illuminating the walls of the shaft. It was like descending into a crystal throat. The ice wasn't white, it was a deep, mesmerizing blue, layered with dark strata that marked millennia of geologic time. "Depth 500 feet, Jax announced, his voice calm and professional. "Hull pressure stabilizing." The first few thousand feet were surreal. We were still in contact with the base, their voices a reassuring link to the human world above. But as we went deeper, the static began to grow. "Depth 5 miles, Jax reported an hour later, passing the Laurentian ice sheet equivalent, hull temperature holding at 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Outside, the ice had lost its blue tint, compressed by the immense weight above into something dark and ancient. The only sound was the gentle hum of the life support and the occasional creak of the titanium hull as it adjusted to the mounting pressure. A feeling of profound isolation began to creep in. We were a single point of light sinking through a solid 12-mile-thick wall of ice on a moon 500 million miles from home. "Radio contact is getting choppy," Maya murmured, adjusting her headset. "We're losing them." Ben was staring at his biometric monitor, his own heart rate displayed in a green, jagged line.
"It's to be expected," he said, though his voice was a little strained. "The signal can't penetrate this much ice."
"Depth 10 miles, Jack said. The numbers on the depth gauge seemed to be accelerating. The pressure outside was now immense, enough to crush a military submarine like a soda can. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple. I'd been in high-stress situations before, micrometeorite storms, equipment failures in hard vacuum, but this was different. This was a slow, inexorable squeeze. "Almost there," Maya whispered, her face pressed close to the thick quartz viewport. "Come on, come on." Then the base's voice, broken by static, crackled one last time. "Triton, we are losing you. Report when surface." The transmission dissolved into a hiss. We were alone. "Depth 12.4 miles, Jack said, his voice tight. "Sensors indicate we are approaching the terminus of the borehole. Brace for entry." I held my breath. On the forward screen, the sonar image showed the end of the narrow shaft opening into a vast, undefined space. A soft bump, and then a shift in the submersible's buoyancy told us we were through. We had entered the ocean of Europa. The moment we cleared the borehole, the feeling of claustrophobia was replaced by an unnerving agoraphobia. Jax killed our downward momentum, letting the Triton hang suspended in the water. He switched on the main external floodlights. Their powerful beams cut through the absolute blackness, illuminating a blizzard of drifting particles, the organic soup the probe had detected. It was like floating inside a snow globe filled with ink and dust. "Life," Maya breathed, her voice filled with a reverence that bordered on worship. "It's everywhere." Ben was already running preliminary scans. "Microscopic, looks like simple extremophilic bacteria, nothing complex, yet." For an hour, we drifted, taking readings, collecting our first water samples. The initial plan was to stay close to the borehole, exploring the immediate ice-water interface, but it was the long-range sonar that changed everything. "Whoa," Jack said, tapping a finger on his screen. "Getting a strange return. A big one." I leaned forward, looking over his shoulder. On the screen, a series of sharp, geometric lines were resolving out of the background noise. They were several miles ahead of us and deep, near the ocean floor. "That's not a geological formation," I said, tracing the perfect angles with my eyes. "Nature doesn't build in straight lines and 90-degree angles on this scale." "It looks artificial," Maya whispered. A current of excitement and apprehension ran through the cabin. This was it. This was more than just microbes. "Take us down, Jax. Slow and steady." The descent to the ocean floor took another 30 minutes. The entire way down, the structures on the sonar grew clearer, larger, more impossibly complex. When we were finally within visual range, Jax angled the floodlights downward. What they revealed silenced us all. Spread out below us was a city. It was vast, covering the seafloor as far as our lights could penetrate, but it was utterly alien. There were no buildings as we would understand them. Instead, colossal spires of a dark, non-reflective material twisted up from the ground, some reaching thousands of feet into the darkness above. Great, sweeping arches connected them, forming impossible, gravity-defying bridges. The angles were all wrong, subtly skewed in a way that made my head ache just looking at them. "My God," Ben whispered, his face pale. "And who could have built this?" added Jax, his usual bravado gone, replaced with simple awe. We spent the next few hours exploring the outskirts of the silent metropolis. Jax piloted the Triton with surgical precision, guiding us through canyons formed by towering monoliths. The architecture was profoundly unsettling. There were no doors, no windows,
no signs of habitation that we could recognize. The entire city felt sealed, monolithic, as if it had been carved from a single rock.
The material itself was strange. My geological sensors couldn't identify it. It had the density of basalt but absorbed light almost completely, giving the structures a flat, shadow-like appearance even under our intense floodlights. "There's something else," Ben said, pointing to his monitor. "Look at the spires. There's no biofouling. Nothing is growing on them." He was right. In an ocean teeming with microscopic life, these structures were utterly barren. It was as if the city was exuding some kind of repellent, or as if life itself knew to give this place a wide berth. The silence was absolute. No current stirred the water here, no sounds echoed off the walls. It was a tomb, impossibly ancient and impossibly vast. "I'm picking up a faint energy reading from the city's center," Maya said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's not thermal, not electromagnetic. I don't know what it is." "Can you get a bearing?" I asked. She nodded, manipulating her controls. "Yeah, it's coming from that large central spire, the one that looks like a coiled spine." "Take us in, Jax," I said. As we moved deeper into the city, a deep sense of unease settled over me. We were intruders here, trespassers in a place that was never meant for human eyes. The scale of it was humbling, crushing. We were a tiny mote of dust floating through a graveyard of giants. And the silence was the worst part. It felt heavy, expectant, as if the entire city was holding its breath, waiting for us. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the feeling as my own anxiety. We were scientists, explorers, but deep down, a primal instinct was screaming at me that we had made a terrible, terrible mistake. We glided through the cavernous boulevards of the alien city, our floodlights carving temporary tunnels through the eternal night. The further we went, the more oppressive the architecture became. Structures leaned over us at impossible angles, creating a ceiling of black stone that seemed to press down on our tiny sphere. The silence remained absolute, broken only by the hum of our own life support systems. "Where still no signs of the builders," I noted, scanning the featureless walls with our high-resolution cameras. "No carvings, no inscriptions, nothing. It's like they built it and just vanished," Maya said, her earlier excitement now tinged with a nervous edge.
Ben had been quiet for a while, his attention fixed on his biology scanner. "It's more than just the lack of biofouling," he said suddenly. "The ambient microbial count is dropping the closer we get to the center. It's almost sterile here. Life is actively avoiding this place." His words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Before I could respond, a jarring alarm blared through the cabin. "What the hell?" Jax exclaimed, his hands flying across the console. "Navigational system just glitched. For a second there, it showed her position as 600 miles from here." "A magnetic anomaly, maybe?" I suggested, though I didn't believe it. The ship's systems were hardened against Jupiter's massive magnetic field. "Maybe," Jax grunted, resetting the system. "Everything's back to normal. Probably just a one-off." But it wasn't. A few minutes later, as we passed under a massive, twisted archway, it happened again. The lights inside the cabin flickered, and for a split second, the main view screen showing the feed from the forward camera dissolved into a shower of static. When the image returned, I could have sworn I saw something move at the edge of the light, a shadow, immense and fluid, that detached itself from the city's structures and vanished into the darkness. "Did you see that?" I asked, leaning forward. "See what?" Jack said. "I was watching the pressure gauges." "I thought I saw—" I trailed off, unsure of what I'd seen. A trick of the light. It had to be. But then Maya gasped. "The sonar! Look at the sonar!" We all turned to her screen. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the long-range sonar display showed a colossal shape passing directly over us. It wasn't just big, it was oceanic in scale, dwarfing the city spires below. It had no definite form, just a vast, moving blot that absorbed the sonar pings completely. And then, just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. The screen was clear again. "What was that?" Ben's voice was barely a whisper.
Jack shook his head, running a diagnostic.
Gotta be a sensor ghost. A reflection off these weird-angled buildings is probably playing hell with the system. There's nothing out there. I'd see it on the passive sensors if there was. He sounded confident, but I saw the way his knuckles were white on the controls. He was trying to convince himself as much as us. This place was starting to get to him, too. It was getting to all of us. The oppressive geometry, the sterile water, the profound, waiting silence, it was all working on our nerves, making us see shadows where there were none. I tried to rationalize it. We were in an extreme environment, under immense psychological pressure. It was natural for our minds to play tricks on us. We had to hold it together, stay objective. "Keep your eyes on the instruments," I ordered, my voice firmer than I felt. "Log the anomaly, Jax, and let's keep moving toward that energy signature." We continued on, but the atmosphere inside the Triton had changed. The thrill of discovery had evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Every flicker of a gauge, every creak of the hull made us jump. We were no longer explorers. We were prey, waiting for a predator we couldn't see. We drifted through the dead, silent streets, and I had the unshakable feeling that we were not alone. The city wasn't empty. It was just very, very good at hiding its inhabitants. Or maybe, I thought with a fresh wave of horror, we were the echo. A faint, meaningless sound in a place that had been silent for millions of years. And something had just heard us. The energy reading from the city's center grew stronger as we approached the coiled spinal spire. It was a strange, persistent signal, and Maya still couldn't classify it. But as we got closer, something else began. It started as a vibration, a low-frequency thrum that resonated through the titanium hull. It was so low, it was more felt than heard, a deep shudder in the bones, in the fillings of your teeth. "Seismic activity?" I asked, looking over at my geological sensors. They were flat. Nothing. "I don't think so," Maya said, her hands flying across her console, trying to isolate the signal. "It's rhythmic, almost patterned." The thrum grew steadily louder, coalescing from a physical sensation into a sound, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't coming through the water. Our external hydrophones were picking up nothing but silence. It was as if the sound was originating inside the Triton itself, or inside our heads.
"Jax, can you isolate that noise?" I asked, the hum making it hard to concentrate. "Is it a system malfunction?" "Running a full diagnostic," he replied, his brow creased. "Life support is green, reactor is stable. There's no source for it on board, Avery. This is impossible." The hum continued to build, and within its depths I began to hear something else. Faint, complex modulations, like a voice speaking a language of pure bass. It was a song sung from the bottom of the world. And then, the visions started. It began with Ben. He let out a sharp, choked gasp and recoiled from the viewport, pressing himself back into his seat. "Ben, what is it?" I demanded. "Faces," he whispered, his eyes wide with terror. "In the water. I saw faces. They were just floating there, watching us." I looked out the viewport. There was nothing but the inky blackness and the slow drift of marine snow. "There's nothing there, Ben. It's a reflection, the strain." "No," he insisted, his voice cracking. "They were pale, with big dark eyes." Before I could calm him, my own world tilted. Faintly, at the very edge of my hearing, layered over the deep hum, I heard a child's whisper. Daddy? My blood ran cold. It was Lily's voice. Exactly as I remembered it from when she was 5 years old, when she'd wake up from a nightmare and call for me from her room. Lily? I murmured, my rational mind screaming that it was impossible. Daddy, I'm scared. It's dark. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the arms of my chair. It was a hallucination. The pressure, the nitrogen in the air mix, the psychological stress. It had to be. But it sounded so real, so terrifyingly real. Avery, are you okay? Maya's voice cut through the fog in my head. I opened my eyes. She was looking at me with concern, but her own face was slick with sweat. I'm fine, I lied, my heart hammering against my ribs. Just the pressure. This isn't pressure, Maya said, her fingers a blur as she rerouted data feeds. The humming sound was now a palpable presence in the cabin, a constant, oppressive drone. This signal, it's not a sound wave. It's not electromagnetic. It's something else. It's incredibly complex. It's like a language. Jack suddenly let out a string of curses, clutching his head. "Shut it off," he yelled, looking wildly around the cabin. "Whatever you're doing, shut it off." "Shut what off?" I asked, moving toward him. "The damn radio! I can hear static, old distress calls. I hear a mayday call from the Challenger disaster, for crying out loud. Make it stop!" The small cabin of the Triton had become a madhouse. Ben was muttering to himself, staring at the empty space in front of him. Jax was battling phantom radio signals, and I was hearing the ghost of my daughter whispering in my ear. Only Maya seemed to be holding on, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear, as she frantically tried to understand the phenomenon that was tearing us apart. The humming intensified, and the whisper came again, closer this time, as if she were standing right behind me. "Let me in, Daddy. It's so cold out here." I spun around in my seat, my eyes darting around the cramped space. There was no one there, but the sense of presence was overwhelming. The song from the deep wasn't just a sound. It was a key, and it was unlocking the darkest, most private rooms in our minds, letting the nightmares out to play. The city wasn't empty. It was singing to us, and its voice was madness. "It's not real," Maya said, her voice cutting through the cacophony of our shared insanity. She wasn't looking at any of us. Her eyes were fixed on a complex waveform analysis on her screen, her expression a mixture of terror and pure scientific revelation. "It's not sound. It's not radio. It's not happening out there." She tapped a finger against her own temple. "It's happening in here." "What are you talking about?" I demanded, trying to block out Lily's voice, which was now pleading with me to open the hatch. "Our instruments," she explained, her voice gaining speed and conviction. "The ones picking up this song, they're not detecting an external signal. They're reading the secondary electromagnetic fields generated by our own neural activity. Our brains are the receivers. The signal is being broadcast directly into our minds." The implications of her words washed over me, a wave of ice water that was colder than the ocean outside. We weren't hearing something. Something was making us hear. "That's impossible," Ben stammered, shaking his head as if to dislodge the faces he was seeing. "Telepathy? That's science fiction!" "We're in a city built by aliens at the bottom of a frozen ocean 500 million miles from Earth. I think we're a little past the science fiction stage, Ben. Think about it. This ocean is pitch black. There's no light. Sound would work, but what if there was a more efficient way to perceive the world?" She pointed a trembling finger at the main view screen, at the empty black water outside. "They're blind. Whatever lives here, whatever built this place, evolved in total darkness. They don't have eyes. They don't need them. They see in a different way." The deep humming sound that filled the cabin suddenly changed. It was no longer just a noise. It felt directed, inquisitive. "It's a sonar," Maya whispered, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place in her mind. "A biological, psionic sonar. They're pinging their environment, not with sound waves, but with focused bursts of consciousness. They're seeing the world around them by reading the echoes that bounce back from other minds." Jack stopped wrestling with his phantom radio calls and stared at her. "You're saying they're pinging us?" "Yes," she said, her eyes wide with a terrible understanding. "But they're not seeing the Triton. To them, this sub is just a dead piece of rock. It has no mind. It doesn't reflect the signal. But we do. Inside this rock, there are 4 lights. 4 points of consciousness in an ocean that has been silent and mindless for millions of years. We're like foghorns in a library. We're the loudest thing they've ever perceived in their entire existence." A profound, bottomless horror opened up beneath me. The titanium hull, the 12 miles of ice, the hundreds of millions of miles of space that separated us from home, none of it mattered. In the one place we were supposed to be safe, inside our own heads, we were utterly exposed. We were naked. The things in the dark weren't hunting us. They weren't trying to scare us. They were just looking. They were touching us with their minds, trying to understand what we were. And their touch, the simple act of their perception, was what was generating the hallucinations. Our brains, unable to process the alien sensation, were simply short-circuiting, filling in the blanks with our own deepest fears and sorrows. "They're curious," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. Maya nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Yes, and I don't think they know that their curiosity is destroying us." The humming intensified once more. It was no longer a vague, directionless song. It was focused. It was the sound of a vast, ancient, and utterly alien intelligence turning its full, undivided attention directly upon the 4 insignificant sparks of light that had trespassed into its silent world. They had found us, and now they were trying to see what we were made of. The moment their attention focused, the gentle probing became an outright psychic assault. It wasn't malicious. It felt more like a child taking apart a watch to see how it works, utterly indifferent to the fact that the watch was screaming. Jax was the first to completely break. He suddenly let out a strangled cry and recoiled from the controls, his body convulsing. "No! Get out! Get out of my head!" His eyes were screwed shut, but I knew he wasn't seeing the inside of the Triton. He was somewhere else. Or rather, somewhen else. "I can feel it," he gasped, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead. "The impact! The fire! Mike, I'm sorry!" He was reliving the F-18 crash that had ended his Navy career, but this was worse than a memory. I could almost feel the echoes of it myself. The sickening lurch of the jet, the smell of burning fuel, the piercing scream of his wingman, Mike. The creatures weren't just making him see it, they were making him feel it, from every perspective at once. He was the pilot, the victim, and the helpless observer all at the same time. The sheer sensory overload was ripping his sanity apart. While I tried to reach for Jax, Ben started screaming. It wasn't a scream of terror, but of violation. He scrabbled at his own head, his fingernails leaving red marks on his temples. "My thoughts," he shrieked, his voice thin and reedy. "They're taking them. It's not a hallucination, Avery. It's a data transfer. They're pulling my memories out like files from a hard drive." He looked at me, his eyes wild with intellectual terror. "My thesis on extremophile proteins. My childhood. They're just browsing. They're looking at the periodic table I memorized in high school, and they're confused by it." The concept was so alien, so horrifyingly intimate, that it almost paralyzed me. Our very identities, our knowledge, our experiences were being rifled through by an intelligence that didn't even comprehend what it was looking at. Then it turned its full attention to me. The vague whisper of Lily's voice coalesced into a perfect, vivid image of her standing just outside the forward viewport. She wasn't wearing a spacesuit. She was in her favorite yellow sundress, her face pale, her lips blue with cold. She pressed her small hands against the thick quartz, her breath fogging the non-existent air. "Daddy," she mouthed, her voice echoing directly in my skull. "You left me. You went away and you left me here in the dark. It's so lonely." "You're not real," I choked out, my hands gripping the console so hard my knuckles ached. "You're at Stanford. You're safe." The image of Lily smiled, a sad, heartbreaking expression. "But you're not safe, Daddy. They're here with you. But you can make them go away. All you have to do is let me in. The outer hatch controls are right there. Just open the door." It was a perfect emotional trap. It was using my deepest love and my greatest guilt, the guilt of every parent who has to leave their child for work, as a weapon against me. Part of my brain, the rational part, knew it was a lie, a psychic projection designed to provoke a reaction. But the other part, the father in me, screamed in agony at the sight of my child's suffering. My hand twitched, moving involuntarily toward the emergency hatch release. Only Maya seemed to be processing the invasion differently. She wasn't screaming or fighting. She sat perfectly still in her chair, her eyes unfocused, a thin trickle of blood running from her nose. Her lips moved silently, as if she were trying to pronounce words in a language with no syllables. She was the signals expert. She was the translator. And the message was erasing her. The things outside weren't attacking us. They were communicating, or trying to. But their language was raw existence. Their grammar was memory. Their syntax was emotion. And in trying to speak to us, they were unmaking us, thought by thought, memory by memory. The onslaught was relentless. The fragile ecosystem of our minds, built on a lifetime of shared human context, was collapsing under the weight of an intelligence that operated on a completely different plane of reality. Maya was lost first. She had been the most open, the most receptive, and she paid the price. The silent mouthing stopped. She picked up a data pad, her movements stiff and jerky, and began to draw. She drew a single, continuous, spiraling line that started in the center of the screen and grew outward, a perfect, intricate pattern that resembled both a galaxy and the cross-section of a seashell. Her eyes were glassy, reflecting the light of the screen but seeing something else entirely. She was no longer receiving the signal. She had become a part of it. The blood from her nose dripped onto her jumpsuit unnoticed. She was transcribing the language of the void, and it had hollowed her out, leaving only the pattern behind. Jax, meanwhile, had devolved into pure animal paranoia. The ghosts of his past had been replaced by a more immediate, tangible threat. He was convinced the creatures were no longer just in his head, but inside the Triton's systems. "They're in the wires," he yelled, lunging for the main power conduit. "They're coming through the lights. I have to cut the power. It's the only way." I tackled him, slamming him back into his seat. He was stronger than he looked, fueled by adrenaline and terror. We wrestled in the cramped space, a desperate, clumsy fight. He wasn't Jax anymore. He was just a cornered animal trying to escape a trap he couldn't see. "Jax, stop! You'll kill us all!" I grunted, trying to pin his arms. "We're already dead!" he screamed, his spittle hitting my face. "They're wearing our faces. They're crawling inside us." While I struggled with Jax, Ben simply stopped. His panicked shrieks about his stolen memories faded into a low whimper and then into silence. He slumped into his chair, his body rigid, his gaze fixed on the bulkhead in front of him. His eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them. His mind, facing a violation it could not comprehend, had performed an emergency shutdown. He had retreated to a place so deep inside himself that nothing could reach him. He was gone, a living shell. I finally managed to subdue Jax, using a restraining strap from the medical kit to bind his wrists to his chair. He continued to struggle, hissing curses at the flickering cabin lights, at the very air he was breathing. And then there was me. I was the last one left, the last bastion of coherent thought in a 10-foot sphere of insanity. The projection of Lily was still there, her face pressed against the viewport, her silent pleas to open the door a constant, agonizing pressure in my mind. But seeing what had happened to my crew, to my friends, had forged a core of cold, hard rage inside me. The mission was over. The discovery was a curse. Survival was the only thing that mattered. I crawled over to the pilot's station, my body aching from the fight with Jax. The controls seemed alien, the numbers on the screens meaningless. The humming from the depths grew louder, more insistent, as if sensing my defiance. It focused on me, the last light still burning. The image of Lily changed. Her sad expression hardened. Her eyes began to glow with a faint, predatory light. "You can't escape, Daddy," the voice in my head said, no longer sounding like my daughter, but like something ancient and vast, trying on her voice like a costume. "We are here. We are now. We are all." I ignored it. My fingers found the controls for the emergency ballast blow. It was a one-shot system. It would jettison our heavy scientific equipment and send us rocketing toward the surface. It was our only chance. I took a deep breath, ready to press the button. We were going home. I would make sure of it. I had to. But as my finger descended, a horrifying realization dawned on me. My hand was shaking uncontrollably, and it wasn't from fear. It was because it was no longer entirely my own. My finger hovered over the emergency ascent button. I pushed, commanded my muscles to act, but my hand refused to obey. It trembled violently, a marionette with its strings being pulled by two different masters. The rage that had sustained me began to dissolve, replaced by a cold, creeping numbness that started in my fingertips and spread up my arm. The part of me that was still Avery Walsh screamed in silent frustration. The other part, the invading presence, was calm, detached, curious. It examined my motor functions, my desperate struggle for control, with the dispassionate interest of a lab rat in a maze. The projection of Lily outside the viewport faded away, no longer necessary. The entity was done whispering through the keyhole. It was now inside the room. My own thoughts began to feel sluggish, foreign. Memories surfaced, unbidden, but I experienced them from an outside perspective. I saw myself teaching Lily to ride a bike, not as a father, but as a collection of chemical and electrical signals encoding an event. I felt the pride, the love, the fear of her falling, but they were just data points, tagged and categorized by a consciousness that did not possess these emotions itself. It was learning me. It was deconstructing me. My sense of self, the core of I that had been Avery Walsh for 53 years, was fraying at the edges, dissolving into the vast cold ocean of this other mind. I was a single drop of rain falling into the Pacific. With the last vestige of my own will, I reached for the comms panel with my other hand. I couldn't save us, but I could warn them. I could send one last message. My fingers fumbled on the keypad, initiating a final compressed telemetry burst to Connemara Base.
It wouldn't be a voice message. They were too far away for that. Just data, a snapshot of our final moments, pressure readings, life support status, biosigns. Maybe, just maybe, they would see the impossible readings and understand. Maybe they would seal the borehole. My finger mashed the send button. A green light confirmed the packet was away. It was my last act of defiance. And then, they lost interest. The struggle ceased. The probing stopped. The pressure in my mind vanished. For a single blissful second, there was silence. My thoughts were my own again. The terror rushed back in, clear and sharp. It was in that moment of clarity that I understood. They weren't trying to kill us. They weren't trying to communicate. They were simply observing. And now their observation was complete. They had learned everything they could from the 4 strange, warm sparks of consciousness that had flickered so briefly in their eternal darkness. We were no longer interesting. A soundless crack echoed not in the cabin, but in the center of my being. It was the sound of a fundamental law of physics being casually rewritten. On the engineering panel in front of me, a single display lit up with a red warning. It was the atmospheric pressure sensor for the cabin interior. The number on the screen was climbing at an impossible rate. 15 pounds per square inch, 100, 1,000, 5,000. It stopped at 15,000 psi, the exact ambient pressure of the European ocean floor. I looked at the hull integrity sensor right next to it. It glowed a steady, reassuring green. Hull integrity, 100%. The 2 readings were a paradox. They could both not be true. The hull was intact, yet the pressure inside was the same as the pressure outside.
There was no explosion, no groaning metal, no implosion. The laws of physics that governed our existence had simply been suspended. The boundary between inside and outside had been erased by a will that perceived no such distinction. In my last millisecond of existence, I didn't see darkness. I saw, with perfect, soul-shattering clarity, what we were to them. We were an echo, a brief, curious vibration in an ocean of silence, and the silence was now reclaiming its domain. The thought wasn't mine, but I understood it completely. Then the pressure equalized, and Avery Walsh was gone. On the surface of Europa, inside the warm, well-lit communications hub of Connemara Base, Flight Controller Harris chewed on his thumbnail. For 3 hours, there had been nothing but static from the Triton. The silence was unnerving, a heavy blanket smothering the normal hum of the base. "Anything?" Mission Director Evans asked, walking up behind him for the 20th time. Harris shook his head, not taking his eyes off the waterfall display of signal noise. "Still nothing, sir. We lost them right after they reached the ocean floor." "They knew radio contact would be spotty," Evans said, though he didn't sound convinced. "They're probably just deep in the city, out of the line of sight of the borehole." Then a soft beep broke the tension. A single, tiny data packet, heavily corrupted but readable, appeared on Harris's screen. "Sir, I've got something. The final telemetry burst from Triton." He quickly decoded the stream of data. A frown creased his forehead. "That's not right." "What is it?" Evans demanded, leaning over his shoulder. "It's the final sensor readings. Life support, critical failure across the board. Biosigns for all 4 crew members are flat." Evans's face went pale. "But look at this," Harris said, pointing to 2 lines of data at the bottom of the report. Internal cabin pressure, 15,000 psi. Hull integrity, 100%. Evans stared at the numbers. That's impossible. It must be a sensor malfunction. A catastrophic one. The entire packet is a mess, sir, Harris agreed. But it was their last transmission.
For the next few hours, a grim mood settled over the base. They sent repeated hails, pinged the Triton's transponder, and got nothing but the vast, empty silence of the abyss in return. The mission was declared a loss. The 4 explorers were gone. It was during the shift change, as the skeleton crew prepared for a long and somber night, that the first tremor hit. It was a faint vibration, barely noticeable, like a heavy vehicle driving past outside.
"Seismic?"
Harris asked the base engineer. The engineer shook her head, her eyes on her own console. No, not natural. Too localized. The vibration is centered directly on the borehole. As she spoke, a second tremor hit, stronger this time. A few loose items rattled on the shelves. An alarm began to chime, low and insistent.
"What the hell is going on?" Evans demanded.
The engineer's face had gone white. She pointed to a schematic of the 12-mile-deep borehole on her screen. All along its length, tiny sensors measured the diameter and integrity of the shaft. "Sir," she said, her voice trembling, "the strain gauges at the bottom of the borehole. They're registering massive lateral pressure originating from within the shaft itself." On the screen, the schematic glowed with red warnings, starting at the very bottom and slowly, methodically, moving upward. "The diameter," the engineer whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. "The borehole, it's getting wider. Something is scraping its way up." Harris looked from the terrifying data on the engineer's screen to the silent static of his own communications panel. The final paradoxical telemetry packet from the Triton flashed in his mind. The impossible pressure, the intact hull. Something vast, ancient, and alive had been awakened in the dark, cold depths. It had been drawn by 4 tiny sparks of light, and now it was methodically and unstoppably widening the only path they had made into its world, using it as an exit. A third tremor shook the base, more violent than the last. The deep, resonant vibration wasn't just in the floor anymore. It was in the air. It was a sound, a low, powerful hum that vibrated in their bones, a sound that promised the end of a silence that had lasted for billions of years. The ocean of Europa was no longer quiet. It was coming to the surface.